Welcome back to our lecture series on international economics. I am Dr. Arun Kumar Nandi, Associate Professor of Economics at the college. In the previous lecture, we developed the closed economy framework using the production possibility frontier and the community independence curve. We saw how equilibrium is determined when there is no trade and how autarky relative prices reflect opportunity cost. Today, we take the next crucial step. We move from a closed economy to an open economy and introduce one of the most powerful ideas in economics, the principle of comparative advantage. The principle explains why countries trade and, more importantly, how both countries benefit from trade. To understand comparative advantage, let us begin with a very basic question. Why do countries trade with one another? Countries trade because they are different. They differ in resource availability, technology, and skill and human capital, climate and geography. These differences create differences in opportunity costs. And whenever opportunity costs differ, relative prices differ. And when relative prices differ, trade becomes beneficial. Thus, trade arises from differences, not similarities. But before understanding comparative advantage, we must first distinguish it from another concept, absolute advantage. Before we move deeper into the comparative advantage, it is important to briefly discuss the classical foundation of trade theory given by Adam Smith. Adam Smith, in his famous book, Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, introduced the theory of absolute advantage. According to Adam Smith, a country should specialize in producing and exporting the good in which it has an absolute productivity advantage. Absolute advantage means that a country can produce a good using fewer resources or produce more output with the same resources compared to another country. The logic is simple. If country A is better at producing cloth and country B is better at producing wine, then each country should specialize in what it does best and exchange goods through trade. Specialization increases total world production and both countries benefit. However, Adam Smith theory has an important limitation. It cannot explain trade when country has absolute advantage in producing all goods. If one country is more efficient in everything, then according to Smith, the other country would have no role in trade. But in reality, even less efficient countries trade and benefit. This limitation led to development of Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, which we will now discuss. Further, a country has absolute advantage if it can produce more of a good using the same resources compared to another country. That is absolute advantage, which is developed by Adam Smith. For example, if country A produce 10 units of cloth, while country B can produce only 6 units of it using the same labor, then country A has absolute advantage in cloth. Now, suppose country A also produce more food than country B. In that case, country A has absolute advantage in both goods as compared to country B. Does this mean country B cannot benefit from trade? The answer is no. Even if one country is absolutely more efficient in producing all goods, trade can still be beneficial, and this is where comparative advantage becomes important. So let us now define comparative advantage clearly. So the key question becomes, what happens if one country is absolutely more efficient in all goods? Does trade still make sense? The answer is yes. And this is explained by the theory of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is based on opportunity cost. A country has comparative advantage in producing a good if it can produce that good at a lower opportunity cost compared to another country. It is the difference. Absolute advantage compares productivity. Comparative advantage compares opportunity cost. This idea was introduced by David Ricardo in the early 19th century and remains one of the most fundamental principles in economics. To understand comparative advantage properly, we must carefully understand opportunity cost. Opportunity cost measures how much of one good must be sacrificed to produce an additional unit of another good. Suppose country A sacrifices 1 unit of Y to produce 1 unit of X. Country B sacrifices 3 units of Y to produce 1 unit of X. Clearly, country A has lower opportunity cost in producing X. Therefore, country A has comparative advantage in X. Similarly, country B will have comparative advantage in Y. Thus, comparative advantage is determined by relative sacrifice, not absolute productivity. Now, let us formalize this in a simple two-country model. To simplify the analysis, we assume two countries A and B, two goods X and Y, one factor of production, that is labor. Each country has its own production possibility frontier, reflects its technology and resources. Because technologies differ, opportunity cost differ. And these differences create the foundation for trade. But remember something important from our previous lecture. In a closed economy, equilibrium occurs where marginal rate of transformation equals marginal rate of substitution. That is, MRT equals MRS. And at that point, autarky relative price equals opportunity cost. So, if opportunity cost differ between countries, their autarky relative prices will also differ. For example, in a country, 1 unit of X may cost 1 unit of Y. In country B, 1 unit of X may cost 3 units of Y. Again, this price difference creates the incentive for trade, because one country can obtain goods more cheaply through trade than through domestic production. What happens once trade is allowed? When trade opens, each country specializes in the production of the good in which it has comparative advantage. A country specialized is in X. Suppose country A specializes in X and country B specializes in Y. Specialization increases efficiency because each country focuses on what it does relatively better. This leads to an increase in total world output. In the classical Ricardian model, this specialization becomes complete. There is complete specialization. In the Ricardian model, opportunity cost is constant because the production possibility frontier is a straight line. On the assumption of constant opportunity cost, we know shape of production possibility curve is straight line. This leads to complete specialization. Each country fully specializes in producing the good in which it has comparative advantage. Complete specialization maximizes total output and therefore maximizes gains from trade. Now let us examine the gains from trade more carefully. From the production perspective, gains arise because specialization increases total output. When each country concentrates on producing the good in which it has comparative advantage, resources are allocated more efficiently. As a result, world production of both goods increase compared to the autarky situation, that is noted situation. From the noted situation, but gains are not limited to production. There are also gains from the consumption side. Under autarky, that is noted situation, consumption is restricted to points on the domestic production possibility frontier. However, under trade, countries can consume beyond their production possibility frontier. They produce one good and exchange it for another. This allows them to reach a higher community independence curve. In simple words, trade expands consumption possibilities and increases welfare. But at what price do countries exchange goods? The terms of trade refers to the international relative price at which goods are exchanged. For both countries to gain, the international price must lie between their opportunity cost. If country A's opportunity cost of X is one unit Y and country B's is 3 unit Y, then the international price must lie between 1 and 3. If the price lies outside this range, one country would not benefit. Let us visualize this graphically. In the diagram, we shows in panel A, countries A's equilibrium, and panel B, countries B's equilibrium, both in autarky situation and in trade situation. In the diagram, we show autarky equilibrium for each country, international price line, specialized production point, consumption point, beyond production possibility frontier. For, for the country A, autarky equilibrium is denoted by point K and it moves to point C equilibrium when it participates in international trade. The price line move in the upward direction. As a result, it reaches higher consumption, that is consumption point beyond its production possibility frontier, that is at point C. That means notice that the international price line allows consumption outside the domestic production boundary. This visually represents gains from trade, and it is true for both countries. Country B, autarky situation represented by the point K1, and when it takes participate in international trade, it moves from K1 to point C1. It clearly shows the country B is also consumption points beyond its production possibility frontier. So, what is the final conclusion? Why both countries gain? Let us now understand why both countries gain from trade. First, trade is voluntary. No country is forced to trade. Countries choose to trade because they expect to benefit from it. Second, both countries gain because they exchange goods at an international price that is better than their own domestic opportunity cost. In other words, each country obtains imported goods at a lower cost than if it had produced those goods domestically. That is the key point. If a country can obtain a good more cheaply through trade than through domestic production, it gains. And remember, if trade were harmful, countries would simply not engage in it. Trade continues because it creates benefits for the participating nations. Therefore, the principle of comparative advantage ensures mutual benefit. Each country specializes in what it does relatively better and trades for the rest. This is why international trade increases global efficiency and welfare. Today, we learn trade is based on comparative advantage. Comparative advantage depends on opportunity cost, Differences in opportunity cost create differences in relative prices. Specialization increases world output. Trade allows consumption beyond production possibility frontier. Both countries gain. These ideas form the foundation of classical trade theory. Before we conclude today's lecture, let us summarize the most important points, especially from an examination perspective. These are the core ideas you must remember. First, clearly understand the difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Absolute advantage is about higher productivity, while comparative advantage is about lower opportunity cost. And remember, trade is based on comparative advantage, not absolute advantage. Second, opportunity cost determines the pattern of trade. The country with the lower opportunity cost in a good will specialize in and export that good. Third, in a closed economy, the autarky relative price equals the marginal rate of transformation. That is opportunity cost. Fourth, the international terms of trade must lie between the opportunity cost of the two countries. Only then can both countries benefit. And finally, gains from trade occurs occur on both sides in production through specialization and increased output, and in consumption through the ability to consume beyond the domestic production possibility frontier. If you clearly understand these 5 points, you will be able to answer most theoretical and numerical questions from this topic. Now that we have understood the basic logic of comparative advantage, the next step is to formalize it more rigorously. In the next lecture, we will study the Ricardian model in detail, solve numerical examples, and determine the range of mutual beneficial terms of trade. Please revise opportunity cost and specialization carefully. Thank you and see you in the next lecture. Thank you.